The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, a chilly Tuesday here in Southern California and in Northern California, because the Raiders, I think, just made one of the worst sports trades in history. It is not officially confirmed, but it feels like it's going to be. On the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, answering the bat signal, one of our favorites from the NFL Network and NFL.com, and a former Raiders GM, Michael Lombardi. What's happening?
Not much, Bill. I like taking that drive into Gotham City. What was it, 14 miles?
You're right. Yeah, I sent the Batmobile for you. We escorted you in. So, I mean, we can tackle this from a bunch of different ways. But first of all, is Carson Palmer even worth one first-round pick?
The answer would be no. And I think you have to start under this premise, and this is what I'm writing for tomorrow. Before you even engage in this conversation, you have to ask yourself the question, would we make this trade if Jason Campbell hadn't gotten hurt? Because if you're paying this much to salvage your season and moving forward, then you're making decisions based on a daily basis as opposed to a sustainable basis moving forward. And I think the answer everybody would say is, well, no, we would never make this trade if Campbell didn't get hurt. And so the reality of it is you shouldn't make the trade if you say that.
Right. So that's one problem. Another problem is that you and I and maybe 3 or 4 other people seem to be the only people that noticed that Carson Palmer really wasn't good anymore and had a couple of bad seasons in a row and is pretty limited as a quarterback. And you look at the Bengals are 4-2 without him. Granted, their defense is a little bit better. A.J. Green is better as a receiver than anybody they had last year. But they really haven't missed a beat. Like, I don't get it. I don't think he's been the same guy since he blew out his knee. What do you think?
I agree. I think there's problems with the arm. I think he hasn't been able to drive the ball. And I think this premise, let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. They lose Peyton Manning and the team falls apart. We know that now, after 6 games in the NFL season, Peyton Manning was the glue that wired that team completely together. And so when you have a great quarterback, he makes other players around him great. And if Palmer is worth essentially 2 number ones, then why wasn't the Bengals able to at least win more games than they could? Why weren't they a contender once he came back from the injury? And the answer is because he didn't play very well. Because he made mistakes. And you can analyze this by saying, well, Chad Ochocinco ran the wrong depth on the route, and, you know, they didn't do this and they didn't do that. Well, when they went to the playoffs before he was injured, Ochocinco was still on the team.
Yep. And also, like, just look at it this way. Imagine if Tom Brady just decided he wasn't going to play for the Patriots this year. What kind of an outcry and panic there would be with Patriot fans, or Aaron Rodgers with Green Bay, or even, you know, Matt Ryan in Atlanta. And Palmer decided he wasn't going to play for the Bengals, the fans weren't exactly freaking out about this. I mean, they weren't happy, but once they got Dalton, I think the consensus was, well, we weren't going to win a Super Bowl with Palmer anyway. Now at least we have this new young guy. And I think that's a red flag. Here's another red flag. As you pointed out, no matter who the quarterback is this Raiders team a Super Bowl team? No. They're not going to make the Super Bowl with this team. Do you think they have any chance to make the Super Bowl with this team?
No, I don't see how they possibly could. I mean, you know, first of all, under the current here, the defense is terrible. You know, they played the Cleveland Browns and the dink and dunk offense with Colt McCoy, which, you know, that's a story for another podcast. But the reality of it is Cleveland, you know, that's an easy matchup for the Raiders. But when they play good teams like the Patriots and those teams, you know, they're not going to be able to play good enough defense to win the game. They're going to have to outscore people. So now we know this is a fact in the NFL. You can't score points running the football. You need to throw it up the field, make explosive plays. So when you start throwing the ball, the Raiders' offensive line is going to become exposed as not being the best pass protection line in the National Football League. So now they're playing outside their comfort zone, and it's going to show more areas of concern. I like the Raiders team. I think they have to play their style like the 49ers have to play their style. Now you get Palmer in there. I don't think that's going to work.
And also, like, just the type of quarterback he is at this point of his career. He's not a guy who flings the deep ball. He's not a gunslinger. Like, the Bengals, you talk about dink and dunk. Wasn't that the Bengals' offense last year? Who dinked and dunked more than they did?
Well, no, because he couldn't throw it down the field. I mean, the last three seasons, his average per attempt barely was just around 6.5. You know, early in his career, he was always in the sevens, and that's when they were playing well. And then he couldn't get it down the field. And I said this about him last year before any trade was happening, before he went to the Raiders. So I don't want the Raider fans to think I'm just bashing the Raiders because I work there. The reality, I said last year, he's like a baseball pitcher that used to throw 90, and now he's down to throwing 80.
Yep. We talked about Palmer a lot on the podcast last year because I just thought he was really below average. And a lot of his stats that he was putting up was coming up at the end of games and was deceiving to some degree. But in close games, you could just easily take him out of the game, I felt like. Do we give him any credit at all for the fact that Ocho Cinco looks washed up in New England? Owens isn't even on a team. He got hurt. But is there a possibility that maybe the pieces that he had there were just much worse than we thought?
Well, you know, that would be the theory. I mean, down the stretch when Jerome Simpson finally came in and played, he threw the ball better and they played better down the stretch. But I thought their defense was playing good. But this point here is Chad Ochocinco, I don't think he's washed up. I just don't think he knows where to go. I think the offense of New England is so complicated. Like when you watch him run routes, he's fairly effective. He still has a burst. I was concerned he didn't have it either. But watching him on tape, he does. So, you know, they could run the ball when he was there, but I thought Palmer couldn't get out of a bad play. Everything had to go perfect for him, a la Drew Bledsoe, for him to really be effective. And then when the arm didn't seem like it was there, it really concerned me. So, and then, look, the price is outstanding. I mean, if they traded a 2 for this guy, I'd say, okay, nice chance, take an opportunity, let's see what we can do. But to trade essentially 2 number 1 picks for a guy, Jay Cutler went for basically the same similar price, and he's 5 years younger with a better arm.
Yeah. Well, and then now let's factor this in. Would they change the system, and there's a much more effective rookie salary scale than there once was, I would argue that we always thought that first-round picks and even like high second-rounders were the single most valuable commodities you can have in football. Now with this rookie salary scale, even more valuable, right? Like the last thing you want to do is give away a high pick.
I tweeted that out as soon as it happened. I mean, to me, it's now you want to hold on to your picks like gold. You can't. I mean, when it was so expensive, now you're trading away a pick for an expensive player at $10, $11 million a season when you had this gold pick here that was going to be able to enhance your roster and build it. Well, people say, well, the Raiders have a good team. They just need a couple pieces. And then, the compensatory picks are going to come through for us. Well, the compensatory is at the bottom of the third. You did sign Kevin Boss, so that's going to offset one of your compensatory picks because it kind of go into a formula. I think you hold on to those picks like gold now because they can't hold out, and they're so valuable in terms of you get 4 years at a really cheap number, and you hopefully get a really good player.
And, the other thing is the Raiders had already given away picks. Don't they? They're missing like a second and a third already in the next draft, and now they're missing the top 3 rounds? Do I have that right?
Yeah, and I mean, look, they draft Terrell Pryor and make it very emphatic that he's a quarterback. I mean, you remember this. They traded him. I don't think Terrell Pryor is a quarterback, but the Raiders were emphatic about it, and they're going to work with him. Now they trade over him. So now, okay, Terrell Pryor, I think they used a 3rd-round pick on him. Now, Palmer's coming in, so Pryor probably will never play for the Raiders. Assuming Palmer stays healthy, he probably will never play, and it won't ever work for him. So why did you waste that pick? See, this is something that Al Davis would never have done because he was always wanted to give the players a chance to develop. And again, it goes back to the first thing I said. You don't make this trade if you ask yourself the question, if Campbell didn't get hurt, would we still make the deal?
Now, flipping this around, for Cincinnati, they struck gold with those 2 high draft picks they took last year. Green is great. I mean, Green, I thought Cam Newton was going to walk to the Rookie of the Year award, and now it seems like Green actually might be a dark horse threat to be remembered as the best rookie this season. And then Dalton, he's just good. Andy Dalton is a good quarterback, and you start with those 2 guys, and you have 2 first-rounders next year. That team's in pretty good shape.
And they're good on defense. They don't really need a lot. They signed Leon Hall to a contract extension. Their front seven's all fairly young. And they've been beating up people, and I've said it this summer. People laughed at me. I said they were a good front seven, and they were beating people. And the offensive line's not a bad offensive line. They need obviously. They've got some nice pieces. Dalton's got to continue to. They got to play a certain way, and they'll be effective. And they can't go out there and get in a track meet with people. They realize that they need to run the ball, control the clock, and their defense will wear people down. These two picks, you bring them in at an economic value, you get your team younger, and you get your team stronger. I think it's a smart play for them. The Raiders are going in the opposite direction, which typically is what happens. But, when you trade your one for Richard Seymour, that's one thing because you're trading away an expensive pick for a proven commodity. I get it. I get that one. This one, you're trading away really economic value for an older player that you're not sure of. Now, you wrote this a while ago, and it really has changed my thought process about the NBA, about how you have all those ex-players, or I think you did it on a podcast, all these ex-players who become GMs are now making decisions on contracts, so they overpay players because they feel like that's what they should have gotten when they played. Right. I understand that. And I think there's a little bit of that here in this element. Hugh Jackson, had he not coached Carson Palmer, probably would have looked at the tape a lot differently. But he's in the room probably telling everybody at the Raiders, I know this guy better than anybody. I know what he can do. And so nobody's there to argue with him. Nobody's there to challenge him. And then Chuck Bresnahan was with Carson Palmer, the defensive coordinator, during the good days. So Bresnahan's probably singing, he's the background singer to the Supremes here, to Hugh Jackson. He's singing the song too. And then you got Bob Wiley, the offensive coach who was in Cincinnati. He's also joining the group to sing along. So now you got three guys singing it, and who's going to win three? And where Al Davis always took this approach, he became the contrarian of everything. If I said Bill Simmons lives in Los Angeles, he would think, no, he doesn't. He lives in somewhere else. It would always be the opposite. And so there's nobody there to argue the opposite. And when you get this streak of a guy who's coached a player, he only remembers when the guy was good. He doesn't see the faults in the player. And I think that's like the NBA guys. I think that's what's happened here.
And that could not be more dangerous, especially how many years has Hugh Jackson been in Oakland now? At least last year and this year.
Right.
So he wasn't, Carson had a really deceiving year last year. He finished with almost 4,000 yards, but a lot of those were garbage yards. He had a lot of bad picks. They weren't good. I didn't feel like he played well at all, and it was a frequent theme in columns and podcasts. It's really hard for me to believe that he just hasn't played football now for over 10 months. He is going to be 32 years old in December. He is moving to a new city. He is learning an entire new offense. He's learning timing with all these new receivers that he's never even met. I don't understand for the life of me how they think he can step right in and be good here. I mean, it's going to take at least 3-4 weeks for him to be mediocre.
I bet he starts this week, and here's what Hugh Jackson's probably telling people at the Raiders. Look, he knows the offense. I coached him at Cincinnati. He'll know the offense. He'll be able to come here immediately and play right away. He won't miss a beat. Now, David Dunn, the agent for Carson Palmer, is also the agent for Hugh Jackson. So obviously there's been a lot of communication that you kind of understand in the background. I'm not accusing anybody of tampering here whatsoever, but I'm sure everybody kind of is aware that we know Carson Palmer was throwing the ball. I reported 2 weeks ago Carson Palmer was on the phone with Mike Brown directly trying to see if Mike Brown would do anything, and every time that phone conversation happened, they got further apart as opposed to closer to making a deal.
Yeah.
And so, we know Carson wanted to play, so he's working out. So I'm sure he's been throwing, but again, the speed of the game, the timing of the game, all those things are hard to come in there and pick. Now he gets to play Kansas City, a game where Hugh Jackson says, look, it's not that hard of coverages to understand. We'll just go in there and we'll play. We'll run the ball and we'll force you. But I think he's going to have to prove he can, A, throw it, and B, move around a little bit.
But Lombardi, how many times can we see either a receiver join a team midseason or a quarterback join a team midseason? Things don't work out, and then the narrative becomes in the offseason, well, now he has a whole offseason to learn timing with his receivers. I mean, Brady and Welker throw together constantly. And, any quarterback I've ever heard talk about this says that the single most important thing they can have with a receiver is continuity. And just it becomes almost like an ESP thing where you've thrown so many passes to the guy in practice and just thrown around or whatever that after a while you know exactly where the guy's going to be. I don't understand how somebody could walk into an NFL season and suddenly have that continuity with 5 new receivers. I don't see it.
They won't. It won't happen. There'll be chinks in the armor, and I think what they're probably saying is we're going to feature McFadden more, and the presence of Palmer and the speed of our outside receivers will open things up for McFadden, and it will help us as we gradually grow into Carson Palmer's administration. I think that's the rhetoric that they've got to be using.
How many times have the Raiders acquired a past his prime quarterback? I mean, seriously, is this like 6, 7?
Well, and this price is ridiculous, and I think also the fact that, that they like Jason Campbell. I mean, they truly like Jason Campbell, and I think that's another point about why I said I don't think Mr. Davis would have made this trade, because he really liked Jason Campbell. I mean, Jason Campbell, as of yesterday, was talking about being back in 6 weeks. Now I'm sure Jason Campbell's saying, well, I don't think I really want to come back.
I know you're not a huge fan. You called him the master of the 20-20. He lives between the 220-yard lines and can't bring you home. But wouldn't it have made more sense to trade like a fifth-rounder for Kyle Orton?
Yeah, I would have, just under the theory that, look, we're going to run the football and he's going to manage the game. We're going to go Kyle Orton circa back to Chicago.
Yeah.
Not Kyle Orton circa Denver when he was throwing it to Brandon Lloyd. Yeah, I think as much as I don't like him but at least he comes in there and I can manage the game. I can get through 12 weeks with him. But again, this comes back to, hey, I coached Carson Palmer at Cincinnati. I know Carson Palmer. They've got 2 other coaches here on the staff that are with them. And who's going to argue? Is there anybody in that building that could have said, no, we shouldn't do this? I don't think there was.
Let's switch gears quickly to, we mentioned the Bengals earlier as having a sneaky good defense. I think. I also think Seattle has a sneaky good defense. Are there, we're now at the range where there's some teams with some fluky records. Tampa's 4-2. Cincy's 4-2. We know that's not going to stay. But do you see any of these teams that seem to be overachieving right now actually sticking and maybe making the playoffs?
Overachieving team that could be making the playoffs, boy.
Cincy, Buffalo, Tampa.
I think Tampa's just an enigma to me. I never think Tampa's going to play good, and they do. They go out to San Francisco, and they come back, and they beat New Orleans at home, and finally Josh Friedman throws the ball down the field and makes some plays. Yeah. So, to me, everybody talks about LeGarrette Blount being out. To me, they're going to go as far as Josh Friedman could take them. If he can make some throws up the field, I think they can be. I think Buffalo is exactly what they were this past weekend. If they don't get any turnovers, they're going to have to win the game by outscoring somebody, and usually you fall short there. So, I think the league has kind of declared who they are. I mean, Houston and Tennessee are going to fight for that South. I really believe that. I think they're going to fight for the South. I think it's going to be one of those are going to get in, and one of them is probably not going to get in.
It could be 9 wins takes that too.
Yeah,
you could 9-7 could probably win that one. And
it's funny. Yesterday, Matt Schaub went for an MRI on his hip, but everybody said it was no problem. I've never heard of going for an MRI if there's no problem.
Very good point. You mentioned Tampa. Here's what I noticed at the New Orleans game, and Sal and I talked about this yesterday. I do think Peyton getting hurt completely changed that game, even worse than if Breeze had gotten hurt, because they were just rudderless from that point on, the Saints. And, we know that he calls every play. So just to remove that mid-game is kind of a big deal. Tampa, though, for the first time to me, felt like the Tampa that I thought I was going to see this year. They were going that Rex Ryan Jets ball control, try to ground it out, and not take a lot of chances. And, it seemed like the only time they felt like Tampa was when they were falling behind and Freeman was throwing. And in that New Orleans game, he started going downfield again. That's who they are, right? I mean, that always should have been their identity. Do you think that's is that what will they do that from now on?
I think they have to. I think they have to go into the game and stop trying to dink and dunk the ball and go in there with a kind of an attitude that they're going to throw it up the field and he's going to make plays. I don't see how he can continue to do that if they can continue to win if they don't make those explosive plays. You can't win in this league just running 3 yards, 4 yards, and LeGarrette Blount getting his 125 yards on 25 carries. It's hard to win that way. And so I think the burden of responsibility falls on Freeman to make those plays, and those outside receivers, whether it's Williams, whether it's Ben, whether it's Briscoe, one of those guys have got to come up and be explosive. And Winslow, I mean, going into the game, Ernest Graham and Winslow were the two receivers with the most catches on the team.
Right. And plus, they have the same issue that Detroit has, in my opinion. They don't have that 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 guy who can go over the middle and get a first down. they have big play receivers, which is fine. But if you're going to do dink and dunk, control the ball, ground control, you're going to be seeing a lot of 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 6s. And for Tampa, I think that's a problem. And I also think for Detroit, that's a problem. I was surprised. I really thought Detroit would try to get Eddie Royal today or somebody like him. I mean, when you look at Detroit, do you feel like that's a finished product?
Well, I think Detroit's problem is I think Pettigrew's got to be there, and I think Titus Young's got to make the plays there. I think they have that. I think the last few weeks, I don't think Stafford has played his best football.
Me neither.
I don't think I think he's missed some guys that have been open. I think you look at the early part of the Chicago game. He had guys open and he couldn't get the ball there, and I think he's made some mistakes. I think he's more been the problem more than who the players around him. I mean, Pettigrew's a really good player, and I think Titus Young can be a really good player inside. They need a little bit more power. I think that's the problem. It's like teams that, like the Cowboys, need a power running back, and sometimes I think Detroit needs more of a power back. I love Best. He's kind of a loose play back, but I think sometimes I need to get some more power.
Yeah, Stafford had that one monster game against Minnesota, 378 yards in OT. His last 3 were 240, 219, 293, 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, but a lot of those were thrown up to Calvin Johnson type touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't think he played well at all in that Niners game. I thought he cost him the game. Plus, you're up 10-0. You should probably take care of that game. Do you think the Lions are a little bit of a potential fraud here?
No, I think their defense is good I think their defense can do some things effectively, and I think they have enough balance offensively, but I think he's got to play at his best. I think the way they're set up offensively, if the quarterback doesn't, it's like anything. If Derrick Rose doesn't play good, do you think the Bulls are going to win?
Yeah. What about NFC East? You got Giants at 4-2, Washington at 3-2, Dallas at 2-3, Philly at 2-4. It really feels like any of those 4 teams can win, except Washington's obviously a dark horse. But if you had to pick a team coming out right now with 10 games left, who would you go with?
I'm going with Dallas. I think Dallas is really the most complete team. I liked Washington to start the season. I thought the Redskins would do a better job of managing Rex Grossman, if that's the right word. I was really disappointed in their plan of attack against the Eagles. They never really ran the outside zone stretch. They tried to copy other people's game plan. There was really no creativity in what they were doing, and it wasn't because the Eagles just played so much better. I mean, the Eagles had they allowed guys to be running wide open. Rex just missed them. And he threw the ball down the seam, and he wasn't really doing anything. I think the Redskins defensively can hang in there, but look, they've lost in Dallas and they lost at home to the Eagles, so they've lost 2 in the division. I think Dallas is the best team. If Dallas was able to trade for Michael Bush for the Raiders today, since the Raiders have lost all these picks, if I was the Cowboys, I'd call him up and offer him a 3rd rounder for Michael Bush right now and get him in there and get that power back in there to help them, because they don't have anybody who can move the pile.
Yeah. I'm with you on Dallas. I think I was really impressed by them in that Pats game, because I actually felt like the Pats played well in that game. And to be in a situation where you're down 3 with 3 minutes to go, when you've played pretty well and you haven't had – it's not like they turned the ball over 5 times or anything, or they had like 20 sacks. But Dallas just couldn't put it away because they had bad running backs. Like Felix Jones, how many years in a row is this guy going to get hurt before we realize he's not durable? Like, it's same thing with Javid Best, same thing with Reggie Bush. Like, durability is part of talent, and if you can't stay on the field, you got to go to a plan B. And that's what feels like that's going to kill them. You said Michael Bush. Are there any other running backs you felt like you would have gone after?
Well, he's the one to me that I think you can get, because they want to get Twan Jones, I believe it is. They want to get him in the game.
Yeah.
At the Raiders, and obviously McFadden. So Bush is a free agent at the end of the year, and it seems like they're not going to get it. They're not going to keep playing him. So why not make a move for him? I mean, there's really no other back. If I was Detroit, I'd make a move for Michael Bush as well. I think he would be a perfect complement to Javid Best. There's really nobody else in the league that you could think of. Well, let's go get this guy. Toby Gerhart. I mean, to me, when they go to Toby Gerhart after Adrian Peterson, they go from a really explosive back to a slower back, and the defense says, "Oh, thank God he's in there."
What about these 3 Washington guys?
Well, here's my breakdown of the 3 Washington guys. I think Hightower's basically runs with his eyes closed. So if it's there, he runs hard and he runs for yards. And then I think the other guy, Halu, I believe his name is, I think he gets exactly what's blocked and maybe a yard short. So if the play's blocked for 7, he'll get 6.5. And so Terrain's the best back they have, and he could be an explosive back. To me, they need a running back as well. I wrote that 3 weeks ago, that the Redskins, the way they were running the ball and opening up holes, if they had a better back, they would have been more disruptive.
What about the Saints have Pierre Thomas, Mark Ingram, and Sproles? That's a team that could potentially trade Pierre Thomas, right?
Yeah, and I like that mixture they have in New Orleans, because sometimes Ingram doesn't hit it as explosively as Pierre does, and they need that. And then Sproles, the joker player. Sproles kind of is so good that he just kind of comes in there, and the offense doesn't have to change a bit. They just keep going and making plays.
Why don't we see somebody like Maurice Jones-Drew on the board here? Like somebody's going to give up 2 first-round picks for Carson Palmer, for God's sakes. Why hasn't somebody just going all in on Mojo? And then on the flip side, if you're Jacksonville, and Miami is upping the stakes with Andrew Luck, they're just obviously on a quest to go for 16. Don't you have to just gut your team if you have any chance of getting Luck, or do you even care if you're the Jaguars?
I think if you have a general manager in there that knows what he wants to put a plan together, I think that's what you should ultimately do. I think Jacksonville, when they made the decision on Garrard, whether it was his back or whether it was his performance, that remains to be seen. They had to know it was going to be uphill sledding going into the season with a rookie quarterback. So, Miami, to me, watching them on tape and then watching them play last night, is just the design of the team this offseason wasn't very good. I mean, to think Reggie Bush was going to be a full-time back, that's hard. They never got another receiver to go along with, Brandon. They never got another receiver to go along with the big fella, so they never really had a chance with him, and Hartline doesn't make enough plays. I actually thought that Best was a good slot receiver, but he's been disappearing in their offense, and then of course they don't have a quarterback, and then defensively, they can't generate any power with their defense in terms of pass rush, so their corners become exposed.
Explain to me the whole NFL trade system, because Brandon Lloyd was basically given away yesterday. It's really hard for me to believe. I just know because the Patriots have been stockpiling so many picks. Once you get past the second round, it's really hard to hit on a pick. It's really hard to get a starter at that point. And it's also really hard for me to believe that having Brandon Lloyd for one season isn't worth a 4th rounder at the least. Is there more going on with this guy? Is he a cancer?
No. I mean, Brandon Lloyd has some issues that can be handled, but the reality is this: I think people aren't looking at it clearly enough. If I traded a 6 like the Rams did for Brandon Lloyd, okay, and say I get him for 12 games. He can come in and play for me right away. He knows the offense. He can come in and play for me right away. I get him for 12 games. Now, if I choose to sign him back at my number, that's great. I got him back. I got a really good player for a 6th-round pick or a 5th-round pick. I can't beat Brandon Lloyd. I can't pick a player that good in that round. I know that.
Yeah.
So now, say I don't sign him. Say this guy, I don't want him. He's gone. He can go somewhere else. Or I lose him to the highest bidder, and say San Francisco signs him back at a huge deal. A year later, I'm going to get a compensatory 3rd-round pick.
Is that true?
So sure, he's going to. If I don't go out and spend a lot of money on free agency, I got a chance to get a compensatory 3 back for him.
Oh my God, I don't get this league.
So
I thought at the very least he's worth a 4.
Huh?
I thought he was worth a 4 at the very least.
Oh, I thought he was too. To me, there were actually people in the league asking, is he good? He led the league in yardage last year. Did anybody watch tape on this guy? He goes down the field, he outjumps everybody. I think he could get 12 rebounds a night in the NBA. I mean, he's unbelievable. And
I got mad, like the fans of 12 other teams, I got mad that the Patriots didn't grab him. It's not like we have a deep threat right now. We send Reggie Slater once a game on that same play that never works. Brandon Lloyd for a 6th-rounder, I think he could have made a difference. At least teams have to plan for him, right?
He would have put the Jets in checkmate. Yeah, it would have been over. The Jets would have not been. Now, the Jets are having trouble matching the Patriots now as it is, because as you could see last night, when the Jets go to nickel, they don't have any ability to stop the run. And so even Miami could run the ball on them last night. So the Jets have some other issues internal from their team structure that's really kind of not coming through. The amazing thing about the Jets is when they were chasing Asamoah, they signed Calvin Pace and Bart Scott to extensions for the next season where they guaranteed their base salaries for 2012. I'm not sure these guys can play in 2011.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing. Sanchez has been awful this season. You want to talk about Stafford not being as good as people think? I think Sanchez is a bottom 5 QB this year, just compared to everybody else. Even last night he stunk. Like at some point, we have to really take a look at this guy and wonder what the ceiling is, because we're just not seeing it this year. What do you think?
I don't think he's played well at all. I think he's uncomfortable. I think their offense is very predictable, even more so this year than last year. When Connor's in the game at fullback and they have Mulligan in the game at tight end because they kick Keller off the field because he cannot block. They have 9 guys. They're playing with 9 against 10 and 9 against 11, so that's a problem. And then when they spread them out, they're very predictable in what they do. Teams seem to play. You watch the beginning of the Patriot game. The Patriots knew what they were going to do, and even though they want to stay in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, and his accuracy becomes an issue. I think he's not played well at all this year, and I think again. He gets new receivers in there. He's not really comfortable. I think losing Braylon Edwards for them hurt because Braylon Edwards ran a lot of the routes that Sanchez threw well.
Yep, I agree.
And so they lose him, but he's not played well. And they have no running game. I mean, they can run the ball a little bit on Miami, but they had the one drive. But Sanchez, the Patriot game was interesting because the Patriots played so bad in the red zone that if the Patriots played good in the red zone that day, they would have been a rout. But because they didn't, the game was a lot closer than when you watch the tape. It should have been.
Yeah, I agree there on Braylon Edwards. I know he was a little bit controversial. I know he had the dropsies, but I was always afraid of him as a Pats fan. I am not afraid of Plaxico Burress. I just think that guy is washed up or very close to it, and. You look at that team. I've been writing about this in my column. I'm sure you've noticed too. I think the combination of this new rule that you can't launch, defensive backs and linebackers can't launch at guys. I think it's opened up the middle of the field, and we've seen all these tight ends that have taken off. We've seen quarterbacks having career years. It's weird to me that Sanchez has gotten worse because the rules are moving toward him, not away from him. You know what I mean?
No question. And he can't. And the only thing he can do is push off to make a play.
Right.
That's all he can. He's a jump ball receiver. Now, why the Jets weren't involved with Brandon Lloyd? I mean, if the Jets should have been right there for him.
Totally agree. You and I are both running back aficionados. I text you if I see a running back I like. By the way, I meant to tell you this. I like Hunter on the Niners. I think that guy's a real running back. You like him?
Yeah, he's the perfect complement to Gore because unlike Toby Gerhart, who's slower, he kind of slows the game down, Hunter kind of speeds it up a little bit for him, and so you're not sure as a defense where he is. It's kind of like, Gore in the game, you kind of have a different feel to the game. I think he's really a nice complement.
I look at running backs, I see them like 5 or 6 times, and I make my decision whether I'm in or I'm out on them. I gotta be honest. I like this Ryan Matthews on the Chargers. I think he's been the biggest running back surprise for me this year. Where do you stand on him?
Yeah, no, early in the season I was a little down on him. I didn't think he was making the yards. To me, you judge running backs by the yards they make, A, after contact, and B, after they can make somebody miss. I mean, everybody can get runs based on how much it's blocked. And I thought lately, and since really the Patriot game, I've been really impressed with Matthews, and he's done some things in both the running game and the passing game that have been really special. And I thought at first they might have missed on this guy, but I think they really have hit. And he's proven that he can play in all 3 phases. And I think Tolbert, again, is a nice compliment to him because he comes in and gets a little bit, he gives them some bang and gives them some toughness and inside running that they need.
Totally agree. I would say that's probably my favorite running back combo. I'm trying to think of a better, like 2 guys that contrast each other better than that, but are both effective in their own ways. Is there anybody else like you would put on that level?
Well,
2 guys that bring totally different things.
Well, I think what New England's doing is with what they have with when they run Ben Jarvis in there, and then they bring Ridley in, and I think Ridley does a pretty good, so I think that you have to have different pieces, like Fred Jackson along with Spiller, even though Spiller doesn't make enough plays. I think that's a problem. I think Brandon Jacobs, when he was a little bit better, because Bradshaw, I think, is sensational. I think Bradshaw's, as good as it gets.
And by the way, you've been calling him for years and years and years that somebody should go after him.
To me, I don't understand how Miami can sit there and trade for Reggie Bush, And when you could have had Ahmad Bradshaw and probably could have had Darren Sproles, and would have solved all family business on one day.
Yeah, it's true. I look at that Chargers team because Gates has been out. Gates is coming back. They always start out slow in September. Rivers, you talk about guys who've had secretly bad years. He's been, for him, really subpar. I don't expect that to continue for the whole year. They got out of their whole September doldrum thing 3-1. They had a bye week. And now that's a team offensively. I just think they can explode these next 10 games. Do you think they've underachieved these first 5? What's your opinion?
Well, I think, look, they've won every game other than the Patriot game that was in front of them. That maybe they were a little harder to win than they thought, but typically they start out slow. And the Patriot game, there was a couple flukes in there. The tip the ball by Vince Wilfolk, the going for it on fourth down, the interception because somebody's in his face and he underthrows it. Sergio Brown makes the interception. So they were right there in the Patriot game, and they played them down to the wire. I think this is a really good team. Now, I don't think they're great on defense by any means. I think they needed a front seven player that Larry English has to come through and make some plays for them. But they're tough to handle offensively, and if they get, during periods of this time now, Jackson's not been in the game, Malcolm Floyd's not been in the game, and as you said, Antonio Gates hasn't been in the game. So they've had to manage their offensive weapons around a little bit, and I think that's the problem the Raiders are going to face is can they handle this team and can they handle the explosiveness of this offense? If they can handle the Raiders' defensive front, San Diego will score points on the Raiders.
If I were a Chargers fan, the thing that would concern me was that Pats game. Pats are up 7. They get the ball. I think there's like 6, 7, 8 minutes left, something like that. And Chargers need to stop. Pats just go down the field. And not only do they get all the first downs they need to clinch the game, they actually score on the touchdown. And to me, I just watched that and I was like, wow, defensively the Chargers just aren't there. They didn't even come close to getting a stop. The other thing that would worry me if I were them, so here are the teams they've beaten. Minnesota, they beat by 7. Well, Minnesota's terrible, we now know. Kansas City, they won by 3 during a week when they should have just demolished Kansas City. They were home, for God's sakes. Then they beat Miami by 10. Then they go into Denver. They win by 5. They barely win that game. Like, really could have blown it. They haven't had a convincing win yet. This week's pretty interesting because they go into New Giant Stadium to play the Jets. Is that one of those games we're going to come out of there and we'll know for sure where those two teams are going?
Yeah, I think so. And I think really, watching the Jets the last month, the Chargers should go in there, and if they play their best, they should beat the Jets because the Jets aren't going to be able to keep pace with them. The strength of the Jets was vertical field position and their defense. And when you can run the ball on Rex Ryan and his defense, that drives him crazy because now he can't do the things he wants to do with his blitzes. He can't do the things he wants to do with messing you up on long passing downs, and he gets you in that 3rd, 4, and 5 area. It's a concern. Look, the Patriots, 6 minutes and a half to go in the game, and they took the ball and never gave it back to them.
Yeah. Who gets the wild card out of these 3 teams? Buffalo, 4-2. Cincinnati, 4-2. Houston, 3-3. I'll give you a 4th team. Oakland, 4-2.
I would say Oakland would be the best of those 4 teams.
Really? Oh, so you like the Palmer trade now?
No, I just think they're the best. Oakland should have beaten Buffalo. They had them beat. But Oakland's problems showed up there. See, that's the game that really, if you want to do the Oakland game, the Buffalo game, and the Patriot game, if you want to study how to beat the Raiders, just study those 2 tapes.
Yeah.
And throw the ball to run the ball. And then, to me, Houston, I just have a feeling the health of Houston is going to creep up on them.
It already has.
They lose Mario Williams, Andre Johnson. I've never heard of this procedure done on a hamstring before, and I hope he comes back soon because they need him to be a good player. But their depth of their team, especially if they have to become in an all-passing game like they've done the last 2 weeks. Houston couldn't run the ball the last 2 weeks against the Raiders and against the Ravens, and when the ball they have to make it an all-throw game is when they kind of quarterback gets hit too much and he takes too many hits.
And we don't like Atlanta, right?
I'm not a big Atlanta fan at all. Haven't been. To me, going back to the draft when they traded for Julio Jones, I thought their defense was a problem, and I still think their defense is a problem.
Yeah, and we're not sure Matt Ryan is. We know he's above average, but that might be about it for him. And they really could have lost last week. Have you watched that tape yet?
Not yet, no. But I saw a little bit of the game, and clearly, they're every game. That game there, just watching it on TV, I never got the sense they were in control of that game.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave up. I mean, as bad as Cam played, they were electric on third down. They still converted third downs, but the Carolina team did.
Yeah.
Now, there's a great combination of backs. When Stewart's healthy and Williams is going, and then you add that team is dangerous because unless you're really good on defense and know how to scheme, they run so much stuff on offense. It's tough to deal with.
And the Saints. Can we say that Drew Brees has been a little spotty now for 2 years for what he's supposed to be? He lost the game for them last week.
I don't know what
that's happening more and more with him, right?
I don't know what he was doing on that. And I think the Saints' Achilles heel, and the Packers have the same one, and so do the Patriots, is how good is their defense. You know, the Saints is always, it's hit or miss with their defense. You know, they never control the game with their defense. Neither do the Patriots and neither do the Packers. But their offenses control the game. So when Brees doesn't play to the highest level, I didn't think Brady played, taking nothing away from the Cowboys, but I don't think up until 58 minutes in the game, I don't think Brady played his best football. He missed Deion Branch wide open down the field on the one interception. You know, and he shouldn't have looked over the other side. He should have been all over him. But when the game was on the line, he made plays. So there's moments where these great quarterbacks have lapses, and if they don't play to the highest level, then their defenses get a little bit exposed more and more.
And Dallas did a nice job of both rushing Brady, but also putting a lot of guys back and basically daring him to run the ball, which I don't understand why every team does do, because he just doesn't want to run it, period. And he would have wide field in front of him. It just was ignoring it completely. So Dallas, from a talent standpoint, we like Dallas as a potential comer here.
Yeah.
Just because they can rush a passer, they can throw the ball. You could argue they could be 4-1 or even 5-0 right now, the way their seasons broke, and their division might not be that good. Philadelphia 2-4, we knew they'd start out slow. There's no chance they can rally this, is there?
Well, Philly's going to play the same way they play all the time. I mean, it's going to be a schoolyard. You're going to go out there, and they don't have a down and distance chart. They just start running plays, and if they make big plays on you, they're going to hit you, and you can make big plays on them. I think it's going to get tougher and tougher for them because, look, Vic has taken enormous hits. I thought he was unconscious again on Sunday. He got up, and they put him back in. My man Vince Young comes in there, and if somebody could explain to me, I'm going to go out to NFL Network on Saturday, and I'm going to get my man Jamie Dukes to explain to me what VY was seeing on that interception he threw to basically get the Redskins back in the game. Can you imagine if you're the head coach of the Eagles and you put VY in the game backed up to your own goal line? You're on the 4-yard line, and you go empty and spread it out to throw the ball?
Well,
you wouldn't do that in Madden 12.
I just wouldn't put Vince Young in the game. What happened to the other guy? Is he hurt? Kafka?
I think VY passed him up.
Oh God!
You wouldn't put him in the game.
I would put it this way: Vince Young is the kind of guy that if he's going to play, it should be as a starter. He's not somebody that's going to come in as a change of pace. I don't see that one. I don't see that working very well. I got to ask you about the Niners. Bittersweet. You were the finalist for that GM job. They had a nice foundation in place. You liked that foundation. You really liked Jim Harbaugh. You thought he was going to do great as a coach. I don't think any of us thought that coming off a lockout in basically 6 weeks to put together a team that it would happen this fast for him. But is this a 13-3 team?
Well, when you look at the schedule, you could see them easily winning 10. I mean, I declared them last Monday. I told them to start sowing the banner. They're going to win the West.
Yep.
I think what he's done is, and I think people are getting carried away with Alex Smith here. I think if they re-sign Alex Smith to a long-term contract, then enjoy this success this year because it's not going to last. They're playing a style that they have to play. To me, they're the Utah Jazz. They got to play a certain way, and if they get it out of their style, they can't play with anybody. But Jim's so good at what he's doing, he's never letting the score change his style. Even when he's down to the Eagles by 21, he still ran the ball. Even though he was down 10 to the Lions on the road, he still ran the ball. He knew. I mean, Alex Smith threw for 137 yards. It
was amazing. And, we were watching it. I was watching with some of the Grantland guys on Sunday. Lions go up 10-0. You just assume the game's over. Alex Smith's not going to throw the Niners back in the game. And the Niners never changed what they were doing. They kept running Frank Gore. And as we were watching it, we realized what you just said, that this is also how they got back into the Eagles game. They didn't get back in the Eagles game by chucking it every down. They did it with their defense and with their running game. And at some point, somebody's going to take a lead on them and realize, all right, we don't have to put in 6 defensive backs and play the pass. Like they're not going to change what they're doing. And I think that's when I want to see what we have with the Niners. Their schedule's so easy, though. We might not know until the second round of the playoffs what we have. You know?
No question. I mean, they're going to breeze along. I mean, and look, now analyze all their wins. Other than the Tampa game, which is a blowout, every one of their wins comes down in the fourth quarter, where they win the game because they're just out tough the opponent, they just out physical the opponent, and they just stay in the game.
Well, and you left out special teams. The special teams has been such a huge advantage in close games for them. Ginn. Just explain the Ginn thing to me. Where did this guy was a bust?
Well, he's not a receiver, and Miami runs him out of there because they know he's not a receiver, but he does have an impact in the game as a returner.
Right.
You know, I mean, look, Miami, he beat the Jets single-handedly in the Meadowlands 2 years ago. He returned 2 kickoffs back in that game for a touchdown.
In Seattle in week 1.
Yeah, he beat Seattle in week 1. I mean, you define the role of the player. And if your expectations are bigger than what the role of the player is, then you get mad at the player. You should get mad at yourself.
Be honest. Had you gotten the Niners job, is there anything you would have done differently upon taking that job that you feel like would have maybe not made this team as successful or made it more successful?
I would have traded for Brian Hoyer. There's no question in my mind, and I think it would have made the offense better. It would have been just the team, because Brian Hoyer to me of New England is a lot like Jim Harbaugh. One went to Michigan State, the other one went to Michigan. One of them's kind of, one was a first round draft pick. I think he would have given the team a little bit more of a passing game. And by doing that, I still would have picked Aldon Smith. If you read any of my columns, I thought Aldon Smith was one of the best players in the draft last year. So I would have done that. I probably would have picked Mallett at some point because I thought he was going to be a good pro. But I think they've done a great job there of managing the team. I mean, they've managed the team in the right way. I think it's the future of the team that's going to be determined here. What happens? Can they actually go forward with Alex Smith? And is Alex Smith going to be able to throw the ball enough when they get no passing game? I say it all the time. They're a half-court offense. If they have to go out and play fast break, can they win? I don't think they can.
Yeah, but, you look at the way that team's built, and we've just seen this type of team succeed. The overachieving team in the bad division with a good defense that can run the ball, with the game-managing quarterback, the new coach that has everyone excited. I mean, we've been here before, Lombardi. I feel like I've seen this play before. And I know how it's going to end. They're going to make the playoffs. And they're going to lose in the second or third round. But still, that's fantastic.
If Stafford keeps playing better and they score and they keep making them have to play catch up, but they never were able to get that one punch in there because he didn't play well. Same thing with Philadelphia. If Philadelphia makes either one of those field goals in the second half, they probably don't beat them. But they hang around. They say, "You beat yourself. We're not going to beat ourselves." That's a great coach there. I think that's what he does a good job with. They've stopped the run as well as anybody. You have to be. Like if they played the Patriots, for example, the Patriots would never line up in base formation. They'd make them line up in their nickel, like they try to do with the Cowboys, and then attack their secondary, attack their safeties, because you can get their safeties are vulnerable, whether it's Williams, whether it's Rittner, who they don't even want to put back at safety. They put him in the box. Goldson, you can attack their safeties. Now, how you do that, you have to be able to protect.
Super Bowl champ, if you had to pick one right now?
I think the Packers are still the best team. I think the Packers are still the best. The way they're playing offensively, it's just I watch them every week, and I think, what are you going to have to do to slow them down? I mean, what do you do? And I think you're going to have to score with them, and you're going to have to figure out a way to play really good in the red zone. And that's how you're going to do it. I mean, the Cowboys Patriot game came down to who played good in the red zone. When you play great offensive teams, this idea that you're going to slow them down and handle them is wrong. You got to play good in the red zone.
Were you surprised nobody traded for Matt Forte?
No, I don't think the Bears want to trade Matt Forte. Who are they going to go with, Marion Barber?
Right.
The defense isn't counting the 5 Mississippi before they cross the line, so there's no way they're doing that. And I think he's one of their best players. He's responsible for so much of their offense. They can argue about what they want to pay him, but the reality of it is he's more valuable to the team than anybody else on the team other than Cutler and Peppers.
A eulogy for Donovan McNabb.
I mean, it's really, I don't know how it just ended so bad, and I think Andy Reid's probably realizing, what we're all realizing, how Andy Reid propped him up and made him. But Donovan is not an accurate thrower, and the more third downs you force him into, the better chance you have for him to get off the field, and that's all everybody's been doing this year.
Culpepper, probably the last guy who just lost it that fast, and probably lost it about 2 years before we realized he lost it.
Yeah, and I think probably Donovan lost it before I gave it. I thought he still had a little bit in him, as long as you managed him in the right way. But
yeah,
that he's on a team with no real vertical receivers, and to me, Donovan's not about percentage of completions; it's about how many home runs can he hit. And when he doesn't hit home runs, you're just not getting an average player; you're getting a bad player.
Yeah. Last thing. Al Davis died, as you know, almost 2 weeks ago, and you were in a weird position. You were on these shows; they were talking about him. You obviously knew him. You worked with him, but at times you had a contentious relationship with him. Was it weird to talk about somebody who had just passed away, who you had this kind of topsy-turvy relationship with?
It was. I think obviously, anybody that you're close with, you're going to have. I mean, my mother passed away 2 years ago, and there was always a relationship with her where we would have our issues and back and forth. But I think part of it was just being able to say what you think. And I think, as time moves on, it was best for me to leave. And I wrote about this. Once Art Shell came in and Al wanted to go in that direction, and then I think it's probably best for me to leave the organization because that wasn't going to work out. I told him I didn't think it was the right thing to do. He didn't listen at that point, and so for me it was the end. But so I chose to take the other avenue, and I think, as I look back on my time there, I'd like to think of it from 99 to 2005 and then try to forget about the last two seasons. And I learned a lot of football from him. I think it was really a great experience for me up until after the 2005 season. And I think, we could have turned things around had we stayed on a course, but I don't think he wanted to get control of everything as he got later in his life and wasn't feeling well. I think he wanted to do everything, and that wasn't really good for me either.
Do you feel like there was some additional urgency because he knew like his health was failing, and that was almost why he wanted to get more involved?
You always felt like that, even though he would never admit he was sick. He would never give you any indication that he wasn't feeling well. He was always trying to be the warrior that he had nothing wrong with him. But I do think there was a sense of urgency, and I do think this move here today is a solution-based move, instead of a sustainable move. And every move they've made at the Raiders has been a solution-based move because he felt like he wanted to win right away. And I think that's a dangerous thing to do in the league.
They said the same thing with Paul Allen in Portland when he got, he got sick, and there was an urgency that all of a sudden he had, and he started meddling more and stuff like that. And I do think there's something to do that. I think if you're an owner and you put a time clock on, you have this time clock hanging over your head basically, and you just want results. You don't want to build something for the next 11 years because you don't know if you're going to be here 11 years from now. And it does seem like that's the one thing that changed when you were at the Raiders. When you look at the Gannon and the end of the Gruden era there, you guys had something that was sustainable long-term and short-term, and then it kind of gravitated away from that almost as you were there. I mean, you can see that happening, right?
Yeah, no, and I mean, we just, again, we misjudged the team. We thought we had a chance to keep going, and we didn't. And that we had the opportunity when the three quarterbacks came out, and we just basically didn't even give it any attention because we were talking about Rich coming back, and we were going to keep going the way we were, and we're going to turn this thing right around, and based it on a solution as opposed to sustaining the organization, and that was really, really a horrible mistake. And we had somebody in the room, Aaron Cromer, who's the offensive line coach for the New Orleans Saints, who was screaming for Ben Roethlisberger, but really, and the scouts liked him, everybody did, but it wasn't where he wanted to go in the draft. He wanted to make the team better right away.
Yeah. What was the best thing you ever learned from Al Davis?
To really analyze things from two different sides. I think I've often said this. If everybody was thinking alike in Al's world, no one was thinking. So I forced myself to try to always think outside the box with him, and I learned to do that. And I think this Mike Brown trade is really another lesson from Al Davis. If you're really patient and don't give in, somebody's liable to come up and give you a ransom. Usually Al gets the ransom, but he gave it to Mike Brown this time.
So stubbornness actually can work in your favor. You got to stick to your guns.
Absolutely.
Were you surprised Gruden signed for 5 more years for TV, by the way, just having worked with him? Are you just amazed that he just doesn't want to coach anymore, basically?
I would think he would. I just don't think I think that basically until somebody comes with him, I don't know if he has an out in his ESPN contract or not, but I would think, why not keep doing this job? You like it, and if somebody comes to you, then they know what they have to do to get you out of it.
It's a long time he's been out, though.
I know. Well, but he studies tape every day. If you study tape every day in the league and you stay on top of the league, you got a chance.
Oh, so that gives you a chance, and that gives Chris Collinsworth a chance, and that gives me a chance because I study tape.
There you go. And you have to stay current on the game because the game changes every 3 years.
It is true. Mike Lombardi, as always, great to have you on. We will read you on NFL.com. You've been doing great work this year, and also a lot of NFL Network time for you this year.
Wait, yeah, it's. In fact, I have to go down and they gave me an office here at NFL Film so I could watch tape, but I have to go down to my other. So that gives them the ability to make me go in front of the camera all the time. So I bounce. I'm like a yo-yo. I'm up and down.
Rumors they might just spin you off onto your own network. I don't know if you've heard any of this.
I'm just hoping to get my own show at some point. So that would be fun.
The Lombardi Network. Just you and Vince Lombardi highlights. That would be
there
it. Just anyone named Lombardi. All right, Mike Lombardi, a pleasure as always. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Bill.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at PodCenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.